De rerum natura, or On the Nature of Things, by Lucretius. Book 1. Mother of the descendants of Aeneas, pleasure of humans and gods, life-giving Venus, it is you who beneath the gliding signs of heaven makes the ship-bearing sea and the fruitful earth teem with life, since through you the whole race of living creatures is conceived, born, and gazes on the light of the sun. You, goddess, you the winds flee, you the clouds of the sky flee at your coming. For you, earth the artificer sends up her sweet flowers. For you the expanses of the sea smile, and the heavens, now peaceful, shine with diffused light. For as soon as the sight of a spring day is revealed, and the life-bringing breeze of the west wind is released and blows, the birds of the air are the first to announce you and your arrival, O goddess, overpowered in their hearts by your force. Next, wild beasts and flocks prance about their glad pastures and swim across rushing streams. So taken by delight, each allows you eagerly wherever you proceed to lead them. Then through the seas and mountains and fast-clutching rivers, through the leaf-thronged home of birds and the verdant plains, you strike, injecting sweet love into the hearts of all, and make them eagerly create their offspring, each according to kind. Since you alone guide the nature of things, and without you nothing emerges into the sunlit shores of light, nothing glad or lovely comes into being, I am eagerly striving for you to be my ally in writing these verses that I am trying to set out about the nature of things for our illustrious son of the Memmius, whom you, goddess, on every occasion, have wished to be preeminent, adorned with every blessing. All the more endow these words with everlasting charm, goddess. Meanwhile, make it so that the savage claims of war are put to sleep, and lie quiet throughout every sea and land. For you alone have the power to bring aid to mortals with tranquil peace, since Mars, strong in arms, rules the savage claims of war, and he often lets himself sink into your lap, completely overcome by the unceasing wound of love. And so, gazing upwards, bending back his smooth neck, he gapes at you, goddess, and feeds his hungry eyes with love. And as he lies there, his breath hangs on your lips. Goddess, with your blessed body, flow down around him as he reclines, and pour forth sweet words from your mouth, O glorious one, seeking gentle peace for the Romans. For neither can I perform my task with a tranquil mind when our country is in trouble, nor can the shining offspring of the Memmius fail to attend to the safety of the state at such times. For it must be that the entire nature of the god spends everlasting time enjoying perfect peace, far removed and long separated from our concerns. For free from all anxiety, free from dangers, powerful in its own resources, having no need of us, it is not won over by the good things we do, nor touched by anger. For the rest, turn open ears and a sharp mind, set free from cares, to the true system of philosophy, so that you do not despise and abandon my gifts to you. Set out with constant eagerness before they are understood. For I am beginning to set out for you the deepest workings of the heavens and the gods, and to reveal the first beginnings of things, out of which nature creates all things, and increases and maintains them, and into which nature dissolves them again once they have perished. These we are accustomed, in setting forth our account, to call matter, and the generating bodies of things, and to name them the seeds of things, and to use the term first bodies for them, because all things exist from these first beginnings. It used to be that human life, polluted, was lying in the dirt, before our eyes, crushed by the weight of religion, which stretched out its head on display from the regions of heaven, threatening mortals from above with its horrible-looking face. It was a Greek man who first dared to raise his mortal eyes against religion, and who first fought back against it. Neither the stories about the gods, nor thunderbolts, nor the sky with its threatening rumbles held him back, but provoked all the more the fierce sharpness of his mind, so that he desired to be the first to shatter the imprisoning bolts of the gates of nature. As a result, The vital force of his mind was victorious, and he traveled far beyond the flaming walls of the world, and trekked throughout the measureless universe in mind and spirit. As victor, he brings back from there the knowledge of what can come to be, what cannot, in short, and by what process each thing has its power limited and its deep-set boundary stone. And so the tables are turned. Religion lies crushed beneath our feet, and his victory raises us to the sky. I am afraid of one thing in all this, that you might think that you are starting on the first steps of an unholy system of thought, and are walking the path of crime. On the contrary, it has happened too often that this so-called religion has produced criminal and unholy actions. Thus was the case at Aulis, when the chosen leaders of the Greeks, the first among men, foully defiled the altar of the virgin goddess of the crossroads with the blood of Ephianassa. As soon as the sacrificial headband was wreathed around about her virgin locks, with its streamers flowing down equally from both her cheeks, and as soon as she saw her father standing in mourning before the altar, with his attendants beside him concealing the iron blade, and the citizens pouring forth tears at the sight of her, speechless with fear, she sank in her knees and fell to the ground. Nor was it a help to the wretched girl, at such a moment, that she had been the first child to call the king father. She was lifted up by men's hands and led trembling to the altar, not so that she might be greeted by the loud-ringing marriage hymn when the solemn wedding rite was finished, but that the chaste girl might be slaughtered unchastely at the very point of marriage, a grieving victim, by the sacrificial stroke of her father. All this so that a happy and auspicious departure might be granted to the fleet. Such great evils could religion make seem advisable. Even you today, at some time or other, will be overcome by the fearful words of seers and try to desert us. Why not, since so many are the dreams they can now invent for you, which can overturn the guiding principles of your life and throw all your fortunes into complete confusion with fear? And deservedly so, for if people saw that there is a fixed limit to oppressive cares, with some reason they would be strong enough to fight back against religious beliefs and the threats of seers. As it is, there is no means of resisting, no power, since death must bring with it the fear of eternal punishment. For people do not know what the nature of the soul is. Is it born, or does it work its way into us as we are being born? Does it perish when we do, torn apart by death, or does it go to see the shades of Orcus and its desolate pits? Or does it work its way by divine aid into other creatures, as our Ennius proclaimed? He was the first to bring down a crown of everlasting foliage from lovely Mount Helicon, to become famous throughout the Italian tribes of people. And yet, moreover, Ennius still sets forth in his everlasting verses that there really are regions of Acheron, where neither our souls nor our bodies remain, but certain kinds of shades pale in wondrous ways. He recalls how from that region the shade of Homer, forever blooming, rose before him and began to shed salty tears, setting out in words the nature of things. Therefore, we must not only give a correct account of celestial matters, explaining in what way the wanderings of the sun and moon occur, and by what power things happen on earth. We must also take special care and employ keen reasoning to see where the soul and the nature of the mind come from, and what it is that meets our minds and terrifies us when we are awake and suffering from disease, and when we are buried in sleep, so that we seem to hear and see face to face people who have already met death and whose bones the earth embraces. Nor does it escape my thought that it is difficult to throw light upon the obscure discoveries of the Greeks in Latin verses, especially since we must use new words for many things because of the poverty of our language and the newness of the subject matter. But still, it is your excellence and the pleasure of the sweet friendship I hope to have with you that urges me to undergo hardship, however great, and to keep my watch in the quiet of the night as I try to find the right words and poem with which at last I might be able to hold a clear light up to your mind that will allow you to see deeply into obscure matters. Therefore, this fear and darkness of the mind must be shattered, apart not by the rays of the sun and the clear shafts of the day, but by the external appearance and inner law of nature. Its first principle will take its starting point for us as follows. Nothing ever comes to be from nothing through divine intervention. The reason that fear so dominates all mortals is because they see many things happen on earth and in the heavens, the causes of whose activities they are able in no way to understand, and they imagine they take place through divine power. For which reason, when we see that nothing can be created from nothing, then we will more correctly perceive what we are after, the source from which each thing is created, and the way each thing happens without divine intervention. For if things came to be from nothing, every kind of thing could be born from all things, and nothing would need a seed. Men might sprout from the sea, and the scaly race of fishes from the earth, and birds might hatch from the sky. Cattle and other livestock and every kind of beast, with uncertain birth, would inhabit farms and wilderness alike. Trees would not consistently produce the same fruit, but they would change, and all trees could bear all fruit. Since there would not be generating bodies for each thing, how could there be a fixed and constant mother for things? But now, since all things are created from fixed seeds, each thing is born and emerges into the shores of light from the source of the matter and first bodies of each thing. And thus, all things are unable to be born from all things, because there is a separate power present in fixed things. And why do we see roses in the spring, grain in the heat, or vines bursting forth in response to autumn's call? Is it not because whatever is created becomes visible in its own time, when fixed seeds have flowed together, when favorable seasons are at hand, and the lively earth safely brings forth tender things into the shores of light? But if they came to be from nothing, they would suddenly spring forth at random periods of time and during unsuitable parts of the year, seeing that there would be no first beginnings which would be able to be kept apart from generating union at an unfavorable time. Nor further, in order for things to increase, would there need to be time for seeds to come together, if they were able to grow from nothing. For tiny babies would suddenly become young adults, and trees would rise up and leap from the earth in an instant. It is obvious that none of these things happens, since everything increases little by little, as is fitting for fixed seed, and preserves their kind as they increase. Thus you can recognize that each thing grows and is nourished from its own matter. In addition, without dependable rains each year, the earth is unable to produce its joy-bringing crops, nor is the nature of living creatures, if deprived of food, able to reproduce its race and safeguard its life. You should thus believe all the more that many bodies are common to many things, as we see letters are common to words, rather than that anything is able to exist without first beginnings. Next, why was nature unable to produce men so large that they could cross the ocean by walking through the shallows, rip apart huge mountains with their bare hands, and succeed in living through many ages of living creatures, unless it is because fixed matter has been assigned to things for their growth, from which it is determined what is able to come to be. So it must be confessed that nothing is able to come from nothing, since things have a need for seed by which they all can, when created, be brought forth into the soft breezes of the air. Finally, since we see that cultivated lands are better than uncultivated, and produce better crops when they are cared for by our hands, it is clear that there exist in the earth the first beginnings of things which we stir into being when we turn over the fertile clods with a plow and work the soil of the earth from deep down. But if there were not first beginnings, you would see everything come to be much better on its own without our efforts. Next is this. Nature dissolves each thing back into its particles and does not destroy things into nothing. For if anything were mortal in all its parts, each thing would perish by being snatched suddenly from before our eyes. For no need would exist for a force that was able to arrange the destruction of the parts of each thing and dissolve its structure. But as it is, since each thing is composed out of eternal seed, until a force is present that hammers apart the thing with a blow, or penetrates within through empty spaces and dissolves it, nature does not allow the destruction of anything to be seen. And if time annihilates whatever it removes through the aging process, consuming all the matter, from where would Venus restore the living race, each according to kind? And from where does Earth, the sweet artificer, nourish and increase them, once restored, providing them with food, each according to kind? From where would internal springs and external far-off rivers supply the sea? From where would the sky feed the stars? For infinite time gone by, and the passing days ought to have consumed everything that has a mortal structure. But if in its duration, and time gone by, there have been things from which this sum of things is restored and exists, they are without any doubt endowed with an immortal nature. Therefore, everything cannot be changed back into nothing. Next, the same force and cause would destroy everything indiscriminately, unless they were held together by an eternal stuff entangled to a lesser or greater degree by its interconnections with itself. Indeed, a mere touch would undoubtedly be a sufficient cause of death, especially seeing that there would be nothing with eternal body, whose texture a special force would be required to dissolve. But as things are, since there are various interconnections of the first beginnings with themselves, and matter is everlasting, things persist with their bodies sound until a force found sufficiently strong to overcome their textures meets them. Thus, not one thing returns to nothing, but all things, when they split apart, return to the first bodies of matter. Lastly, the rains pass away, when Father Sky sends them down into the lap of Mother Earth. But glistening crops erupt, and branches turn green on trees, while the trees themselves grow and are weighed down by fruit. Hence further our race and the race of beasts are fed. Hence we see glad cities flower with children, and lush forests everywhere sing with young birds. Hence cows exhausted by their fat lay their bodies down on the joyful pasture, and the glistening moisture of milk drips from their distended udders. Hence new calves play and frolic on shaggy limbs in the soft grass, their tender young minds drunk on pure milk. Thus all things that are visible do not perish completely, since nature remakes one thing from another, nor does she allow anything to be born unless it is aided by another's death. Come now, since I have shown that things cannot be created from nothing, and likewise that once created they cannot be reduced to nothing, lest by any chance you still begin to doubt my words, since you cannot see the first beginnings of things with your eyes, let me remind you, besides that, there are bodies which you must admit exist in things and yet are not able to be seen. First, when the force of the wind is whipped up, it lashes at the sea, overwhelming huge ships and scattering the clouds. Rushing along at times with a quick whirlwind, it strews the plains with great trees and attacks the mountain tops with forest-cracking blasts. So the wind, with its shrill howling, rages wildly, shrieking savagely and moaning with menace. It is therefore beyond doubt that there are invisible bodies of wind which sweep over the sea, the lands, and the clouds of the sky, buffeting them and snatching them up in a sudden whirlwind. They flow along and breed destruction in the same way as when the soothing nature of water is carried off suddenly in an overflowing river, when it has been swollen after heavy rains by a tremendous rush of water coming off the high mountains. It tosses shattered branches from the forests and whole trees, and not even sturdy bridges can withstand the sudden force of the approaching water. Stirred up by the heavy rains, the river rushes against the pilings with effective force. It wreaks a deafening havoc, and beneath its waves it rolls huge rocks, rushing against whatever opposes its flow. Therefore, so too should the blasts of wind be carried along, which, whenever they have spread out in any direction, like a powerful river, drive things before them and rush at them with constant force, and now and then, in a twisting gust, they seize them and quickly carry them off in a spinning whirlwind. Therefore, again and again there are invisible bodies of wind, since they have been found to rival mighty rivers in what they do and in how they act, and rivers have bodies we can see. Second, we experience the different kinds of smells things have, but nonetheless we never see the smells coming to our noses. We do not see warm heat, nor can we apprehend cold with our eyes, nor are we in the habit of seeing voices. But it must be that all these things are bodily by nature, since they are able to set the sense organs in motion. For nothing is able to touch or be touched except body. Third, clothes hung along the wave-beaten shore grow damp, but they dry when spread out in the sun. But we neither see how the dampness of the water settled on them, nor again how it was forced, but owing to the heat. This shows that the moisture is split up into small particles that the eye is in no way able to see. Fourth, as the sun completes its journey year after year, a ring on the finger grows thinner beneath the wear. The fall of water drops hollows out a stone. The curved iron plow of a farmer shrinks imperceptibly in the fields. And we see that people's feet today are wearing down the stone surfaces of the street. Then, too, near the gates of the city, bronze statues extend right hands thinned by the frequent touch of those who pass by and greet them. These then we see diminish, since they have been worn away. But the jealous nature of vision blocks our seeing, which bodies move away at any given time. Finally, whatever time and nature gradually add to things, compelling them to grow in due measure, no sharpness of vision, no matter how it strains, is able to see. Moreover, neither when things age by the wasting of time, nor when rocks overhanging the sea are eaten away by the devouring salt, are you able to see at the time what they are losing. This is proof that nature conducts her business with invisible bodies. But all things are not held packed tightly together everywhere by the nature of body, for there is void in things. Understanding this will be useful to you in many matters. It will prevent you from wandering around, always doubting and seeking after the nature of reality, and from lacking faith in my words. Therefore, there exists intangible space, void and emptiness. If void did not exist, there is no way things would be able to move. For that which is the natural role of body, to roll in the way and obstruct, would be present at all times for all things. Therefore, nothing would be able to move forward, because nothing would provide a beginning of yielding. Yet now, through the oceans and lands and the heights of heaven, we see before our eyes many things move by many means and in various ways. If void did not exist, these things would not only be deprived of and lack restless motion, but would never have been brought to birth at all, since everywhere matter would be still, packed tightly together. Besides, however solid things might be thought to be, nevertheless, you may tell their bodies are loose-knit from this. In rocks, in caves, the liquid of moisture of water seeps and trickles through, and everything weeps with plentiful drops. Food is distributed into every part of an animal's body. Trees grow and bear fruit at the proper time, because food is distributed throughout all the parts of trees, from the deepest roots, through the trunks, and throughout all the branches. Voices travel through walls and fly across closed-off rooms in houses. Stiffening cold penetrates to the bone. These things you would never see happen in any way unless there were empty spaces through which individual bodies pass. And next, why do we see that some things exceed others in weight, although they are no different in size? For if there is the same amount of body in a ball of wool as there is in a ball of lead, it is fair to suppose they weigh the same,
since it is the role of body to press everything downward. But in contrast, it is the nature of the void to persist without weight. Therefore, whatever is equal in size, but is observed to be lighter, without doubt shows that it possesses more void. But in contrast, the heavier thing declares that there is more body in it, and that it has within much less empty space. Therefore, it is certain that what we have been searching for with keen reasoning, what we call void, exists, mixed in things. In order that what some assert in these matters not be able to lead you from the truth, I feel compelled to outstrip their argument. They say that water yields to scaly creatures as they strive and opens fluid paths, because fish leave spaces behind them where the waters, as they yield, are able to flow together. So too they say that other things are able to move among themselves and change place, although all is full. This all has of course been accepted on false reasoning. For where can the scaly creatures go forward after all, if water does not give space? Furthermore, where will the waves be able to give place when the fish will not be able to go? Therefore, either all bodies must be deprived of motion, or it must be admitted that void is mixed in things, from which source each thing takes its first beginning of motion. Finally, if two broad bodies suddenly leap apart from their union, it is of course necessary that air fill up all the void which is created between the bodies. Yet however fast the breezes circulate, with which the air flows together, still the entire space would never be able to be filled up at one time, for the air must occupy each space in succession before all are occupied. But if someone by chance should happen to think that this occurs when the bodies leap apart because the air compresses itself, he errs. For then a vacuum is created which did not exist before, and likewise a vacuum is filled which existed before. Nor is air able to be condensed in any such way, nor, if it could it, I think, without void, contract into itself and gather its parts into one. Wherefore, although you delay by raising many objections, it is nevertheless necessary to admit that void is present in things. And moreover, by relating many arguments to you, I am able to scrape together trust in these words of mine. But these little traces are enough for a keen intellect, and by their means you are able to discover the rest on your own. For just as dogs often find with their noses the resting places, covered by foliage, of a wild beast that roams the mountains, as soon as they set to work on the sure traces of its path, so you yourself, on your own, will be able in such cases to see one thing from another, and to work your way into every dark hiding place, and drag back the truth from them. But if you show hesitation, or turn aside a little from your task, I am able to promise this clearly to you, Memmius. Such large draughts from deep fountains will my sweet tongue pour out from my well-stocked mind, that I am afraid that slow-moving old age will creep through our limbs and dissolve the bonds of life in both of us, before the whole abundant supply of arguments in my poem on any particular point has been sent flying through your ears. But now to return to weave in words what I have begun. The nature of the universe, then, as it is in itself, is made up of two things, for there are bodies and void. Bodies are located in the void, and move in it this way and that. For ordinary perception declares by itself that body exists. Unless trust in perception is firmly founded and flourishes, in the case of hidden things there will be nothing to which we can refer to prove anything at all with the reasoning power of the mind. Then again, if there were no place and space, which we call void, bodies would never be able to have location, nor to travel at all in this way and that in any direction. This is what I have already showed you a little while ago. In addition to this, there is nothing you are able to name which is distinct and separated off apart from all body and the void, which can be discovered to be some third type of nature. For whatever will exist, This will have to be something itself. Now, if it will be subject to touch, no matter how light and tiny, it will, by an increase either great or at least small, if it does exist, increase the number of body and be part of the sum of the whole. But if it will not be subject to touch, and is able from no side to stop anything which is traveling from passing through it, it will of course be what we call empty void. In addition, whatever will exist by itself either will act on something or will have to suffer other things acting upon it, or will be such that things are able to exist and move in it. But nothing is able to act or be acted upon without body, nor again to provide place unless what is void and empty. Therefore, besides void and bodies, there can remain by itself, among the number of things, no third nature that could come and make contact with our senses at any time, or that anyone might be able to grasp with the reasoning power of the mind. For all things that have a name, either you will find that they are properties of these two things, or you will see that they are accidents of them. A property is that which is never able to be disjoined and separated off without a fatally harmful disintegration, as weight is to rocks, heat to fire, fluidity is to water, tangibility to all bodies, and intangibility to void. Slavery, on the other hand, and poverty and wealth, freedom, war, peace, and other things, at whose arrival and departure the nature of things remains unharmed, we are accustomed to call, as is right, accidents. Time likewise does not exist independently, but from things themselves comes a sense of what has happened in ages past, then what thing looms before us, and then further what will follow. No one, it must be confessed, senses time through itself, separated off from the motion and the quiet immobility of things. Indeed, when they say the daughter of Tyndareus was raped and the Trojan peoples were subdued in war, we must beware that they do not accidentally force us to admit that these things exist on their own, just because an age which is past and can't be called back took away these races of men, whose accidents these were. For whatever will have happened will be able to be called an accident, on the one hand of the lands, on the other of the regions of space themselves. Indeed, if there had been no material for things, nor place and space in which all things are carried out, never would the fire, fanned by love for the beautiful shape of Tyndareus' daughter, glistening in the Phrygian heart of Alexander, have ignited the glowing contests of savage war, nor unbeknownst to the Trojans would the wooden horse have set fire to Pergama by giving birth to Greeks at night. You can see then that absolutely all things that occur never are nor exist through themselves as body does, nor are they spoken of in the same sense as void is, but rather so that you can rightly call them events of body and place in which all things are carried on. Bodies, moreover, are partly the first beginnings of things, partly the things that are formed by the assemblage of first beginnings. But those that are the first beginnings of things, no force is strong enough to destroy. For with solid body they are victorious in the end. And yet it seems difficult to believe that anything can be found with solid body among things that exist. For lightning from heaven makes its way through the walls of houses, as do shouts and voices. Iron glows with heat in the fire, and rocks burst apart because of fierce blazing heat. The unyielding hardness of gold is loosened and dissolved by heat, and the ice of bronze is overcome by flame and melts. Heat and penetrating cold seep through silver, seeing that we have felt both as we solemnly hold our cups in hand, and the dew of water is poured in from above. To such an extent does there seem to be no solidity in things, but nevertheless, because true reason and the nature of things compels us, stand by me, until I explain in a few verses that there are things which exist with solid and eternal body, which we are demonstrating to be the seeds and first beginnings of things, from where now exists the entire created sum of things. First, since the twofold nature of the two,
things has been found to exist far different, that is, of body and of place, in which all things occur. Each must be in and for itself and unmixed. For wherever there is empty space, which we call void, there is no body, and wherever body is located, there empty space will never exist. Therefore, the first bodies are solid and without void. Moreover, since void is present in created things, it must be that solid matter exists around it. And there is nothing that can be shown by true reasoning to conceal void with its body and to have it within, unless you admit that what holds it in is solid. Now that thing can be nothing except an assemblage of matter, which is able to contain the void in things. Matter, therefore, which exists with a solid body, is able to be eternal when all other bodies are dissolved. Then further, if there were nothing which was empty void, all would be solid. In contrast, unless there were definite bodies which fill up whatever places they hold, all that is would exist as vacant and empty space. Therefore, without doubt, body has been alternately marked off from void, since the universe is neither completely full nor yet empty. There are, therefore, definite bodies which are able to mark off empty from occupied space. These bodies cannot be struck and dissolved by external blows, nor can they be penetrated and undone from deep within. Nor can they be attacked and grow weak in another way, as I demonstrated to you above a little while ago. For it seems clear that unless a thing has void in it, it cannot be crushed, broken, or split by being cut in two, nor can it take in water, seeping cold, and penetrating fire, by which all things are destroyed. And the more void each thing contains within, the more it is attacked by these things deep within and is weakened. Therefore, if the primary bodies are solid and are without void, just as I have demonstrated, they must necessarily be eternal. Moreover, unless matter had been eternal, before now all things would have been completely reduced to nothing, and whatever we see would have been born again from nothing. But since I have shown above that nothing is able to be created from nothing, and that what has been made cannot be recalled to nothing, the first beginnings must be endowed with immortal bodies, into which all things can be dissolved in their final moments, so that matter can be supplied for the recreation of things. Therefore, primary bodies exist in their solid singleness, for in no other way can they be kept safe forever from an infinite time past and recreate things again. In addition, if nature had established no end to the breaking apart of things, the bodies of matter now would have been reduced to such a state by the breakage of earlier ages, that nothing could be conceived from them within a fixed amount of time and reach the full limit of its age. For we see that anything can be dissolved more quickly than it can be rebuilt. Therefore, whatever the infinitely long span of days of all time that has gone before had broken apart up until now by demolishing and dissolving, never could it have been created again in the time that remains. But of course a limit of breaking apart has been established and remains fixed, since we see that each thing is recreated, and that a finite amount of time for each generation of things exists, in which they are able to attain the flower of their life. In addition, although the bodies of matter are totally solid, which it is still possible to explain how all those things which are made soft, air, water, earth, and fires, are made, and by what force they are borne along, when once void has been mixed up in things. But, on the contrary, if the first bodies of things were soft, from what source strong flints and iron were created, no explanation could be given, for all nature will completely lack the starting point for a foundation. Therefore, the primary bodies are solid, powerful in their singleness. Through a more tightly condensed union of them, all things can be riveted together and display impressive strength. Further, if no end has been appointed to the breaking apart of bodies, yet it is necessary that from time eternal bodies of each kind of thing survive even now, which have not yet been attacked by any danger. But since they exist endowed with a fragile nature, it is inconsistent to think that they have been able to survive for all time when they have been buffeted by innumerable blows throughout the ages. Next, since there has been appointed for things, each according to their kind, a limit of growth and of remaining alive, and seeing that what they each are capable of by the laws of nature, and further what they are incapable of, stand ordained, and since nothing is changed, but all things remain constant, to such an extent that all the different kinds of birds, in order to show the markings of their kind on their bodies, they ought doubtless also to have a body of unchanging matter. For if the first beginnings of things are able to be mastered and changed in any way, it would also be uncertain what can come to be, what cannot. In short, by what process each thing has its power limited and its deep-set boundary stone, nor could the generations according to their kinds so often recall the nature, behavior, way of life, and movements of their parents. Then further, since there is an extreme point in each case that on that body our senses are no longer able to discern, each point is undoubtedly without parts and is endowed with the smallest nature possible. Nor did it ever exist separately by itself, nor will it ever have the power to do so afterwards, since it is itself a primary and single part of another. Thence, more and more similar parts in their order fill out the nature of the atom in a tight mass. Since these points are unable to exist by themselves, they must be fixed fast so that they can in no way be pulled away. Therefore, primary bodies exist in their solid singleness, closely packed and tightly bound in their minimal parts. They were not assembled from a collection of minimal parts, but rather they are powerfully strong in their eternal singleness, and from them nature, keeping safe the seeds of things, has never allowed anything to be pulled away or diminished. Moreover, unless a minimum exists, all the tiniest bodies will be made up of an infinite number of parts, since in that case the half of a half will always have a half, nor will there be anything to set a limit. Therefore, what difference will there be between the sum of things and the least of things? There will be none. For although the whole sum of things be completely infinite, nevertheless, those things that are tiniest will equally be made up out of infinite parts. But since true reasoning shouts back and denies that the mind can believe this, you should give in and admit that these things now exist, possessing no parts and endowed with a minimal nature. And since they exist, you must also admit that the atoms are solid and eternal. Finally, if nature, the creator of things, had been accustomed to compel all things to be dissolved into their minimal parts, it would not now be able to create anything from them, because things that are not augmented by any parts are unable to have those things which generating matter ought to have. Different connections, weight, blows, meetings, motions, through which all things take place. Therefore, those who think that the primary substance of things is fire, and that the sum of things consists of fire alone, are seen to have fallen far from true reasoning. Heraclitus was the first to enter the fray as their leader. He was famous on account of his obscure language, more among the foolish than those thoughtful Greeks who seek the truth. For stupid people find more impressive and attractive all things that they see hidden beneath twisted words, and they can judge those things true which can caress their ears prettily, and which are colored with delightful sound. For how are things able to be so varied, I ask, if they are created from pure fire alone? For it would be no help for hot fire to become dense or to be rarefied, if the parts of fire had the same nature that fire taken as a whole has as well. For the heat would be more intense when its parts were condensed, and weaker when they were pulled apart and dispersed. Beyond this, there is nothing you can imagine happening under such conditions, still less that such a great variety of things could exist because of condensed and rarefied fire. This, too, If they were to assume that void is mixed in things, fire will become dense or be left rarefied. But since they see many things that go against them, and flee from allowing there to be pure void in things, while they fear the steep path, they lose the true one, nor again do they see that if void is removed from things, everything is condensed and one body is created from all. This body could not speed anything from itself, like warming fire sends out light and heat, so that you see that it is not composed of closely packed parts. But if by chance they believe that fire can in some other way be extinguished in its union and change its substance, of course, if they do not refrain from doing this in any part, doubtless all heat will perish completely into nothing, and all things that are created would come to be from nothing. For whatever is changed and departs from its own limits, this is immediately the death of that which it was before. Accordingly, it is necessary that something be preserved safe for things, or else you would see all things return completely to nothing, and from nothing the supply of things would be reborn and grow. Now therefore, since there are certain most definite bodies which always preserve the same nature, by whose departure or arrival and changed ordering, things change their nature and bodies transform themselves, you can be sure that these bodies of things are not made out of fire. For it would make no difference that certain things separate and leave, and others are added, and certain others change their ordering, if all of them still retained the nature of fire. For whatever they would create would in all ways be fire. The truth, as I think, is this: there are certain bodies whose coming togethers, movements, order, positions, and configurations create fire. When their order is changed, they change a thing's nature, and when they are not like fire, nor any other thing, which is able to send off bodies to our sense organs and touch our touch by its contact. Further, to say that all things are fire and that nothing real exists in the number of things except fire, as this same man does, seems to be completely crazy. For he himself fought back against his senses with his senses, and thereby undermined the source on which all his beliefs depend, and the source of his knowing that fire which he names. For he believes that the senses truly perceive fire, but not other things, which are no less clear. This seems to me to be both silly and crazy. What other criterion can we use? What can be more certain to us than our senses themselves, by which we distinguish true and false? Besides, why would anyone exclude everything else and desire to leave only the nature of fire, any more than to deny the existence of fire while admitting the existence of something else? It seems to be equal madness to say either.
Therefore, those who think that the primary substance of things is fire, and that the sum of things can consist of fire, and those who have made air the first principle for the creation of things, and whoever has thought that water alone by itself fabricates things, or that earth creates all things and is changed into all the natures of things, seems to have wandered very far from the truth. Add too those who double the first beginnings of things, joining air to fire and earth to water, and those who think that all things are able to develop from four things: fire, earth, air, and water. Foremost among such men is Empedocles of Anaxagoras, whom an island bore within the three-cornered shores of its lands. The Ionian Sea flows around this island with its great inlets and sprays salty brine from its green waves. In its narrow strait, the rushing sea divides with its waves the shores of the lands of Aeolia from the boundaries of Sicily. Here is destructive Charybdis, and here the rumblings of Etna threaten to gather the anger of its flames together again, so that its violence might once again spew forth flames from its jaws and again launch shafts of fire to the sky. Although this region seems great and marvelous in many ways to the races of men, and is said to be worth seeing, rich in good things, and protected by the great force of its men, nevertheless, it seems to have had in it nothing more outstanding than this man, nor holier, nor wondrous and precious.
Nay, indeed, the poems from his divine mind shout aloud and set out his outstanding discoveries, so that he seems scarcely to have been created from human stock. Nevertheless, he and those I mentioned above ranked far below him in many ways and lesser by far, although they made many fine and divine discoveries, and issued responses from, so to speak, the shrine of their hearts, and with more holiness and with much more certain reasoning than the Pythia, who speaks from the tripod and laurel of Apollo. Nevertheless, about the first beginnings of things, they have come crashing down, and though great, with a great fall, they fell there mightily. First, because although they take away void from things, they posit motion and leave things soft and porous. Air, sun, rain, earth, animals, fruits, and yet they do not mix void into the bodies of these things. Next, because they establish no limit at all for dividing bodies, nor any cessation for breaking up of things, nor further does any minimum in things exist for them, although we see that there is for each thing that extreme point which to our senses appears to be a minimum, so that from this you can infer that the extreme point in those things which you cannot see exists as a minimum in them. In addition, since they have made the primary elements of things soft, things which we see are born and endowed with mortal body. The whole sum of things ought now to return completely to nothing, and the supply of things ought to be reborn from nothing and thrive. And how far each of these is from the truth you will understand by now. Next, these elements are in many ways hostile and like poison themselves to themselves among themselves. Therefore, if they meet, either they will perish or scatter, just as, when a storm has gathered, we see thunderbolts, rain, and the wind scatter apart. Again, if all things are created from four elements and are dissolved into these things again, how can these elements be called the first beginnings of things any more than, on the contrary, things be called the first beginnings of the elements are thought reversed? For they are begotten in alternation and change, color, and their whole nature among themselves for all time. We see thunderbolts, rain, and the wind scatter apart. But if by chance you think that fire and the body of earth and airy breezes and the dew of water come together in a way that none of them changes its nature in the compound, you will find that nothing will be able to be created from them, not a living thing, nor one with a lifeless body like a tree. For each thing combined in a discordant heap will display its own nature, and air will be seen to be mixed together with earth, and fire to stand with water. But the first beginnings in creating things must of necessity possess a nature that is secret and invisible, so that nothing can show forth which would fight against and hinder whatever is created from being able to exist with its own character. And furthermore, they begin from the heaven and its fires, and maintain that fire first turns itself into the breezes of the air, and then rain is produced, and then that earth is created from rain, and that all things are changed back again from earth. First water, afterwards air, and finally heat, and that these things never cease changing among themselves, and travel from heaven to earth, from earth to the stars of the firmament. First beginnings ought never to do this in any way, for something unchangeable must necessarily remain, so that all things be not be completely reduced to nothing. For whatever is changed and departs from its own limits, this is immediately the death of that which it was before. Therefore, since those things which I have just mentioned above undergo change, they must be made up of other things which can never change, or else you would see all things return completely to nothing. Why not rather posit certain bodies endowed with such a nature that if they created, say, fire, these same bodies would be able, with a few of them taken away and a few of them added, and with their ordering and movement change, to create the breezes of the air, and in this way all other things could be changed into others. But, you say, it is a plain and obvious fact that all things are nourished and grow from the earth into the breezes of the air, and unless the weather gives free play at the right time to the rains, so that by the melting of the clouds the trees may sway, and unless the sun for its part cradles and warms them, crops, trees, and living creatures cannot grow. Yes, and unless we have the benefit of dry food and soft liquid, our flesh would soon be lost, and all life, too, would be released from all our sinews and bones. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, we are helped along and nourished by specific things, as are other things by other specific things. Doubtless because many first beginnings, common in many ways to many things, are mixed in things, so different things are nourished by different things. And it often makes a great difference with these same first beginnings, and with what and in what position they are held, and what motions they impart and receive among themselves. For sky, sea, earth, rivers, and sun are composed of the same things, and so too crops, trees, and animals, but they are mixed with different things and are moved in different ways. And furthermore, here and there in our verses themselves, you see many letters shared by many words, although it is still necessary to admit that the verses and words differ among themselves in meaning and in the sounding of their sounds. So much can letters accomplish with only a change in ordering, but the first beginnings of things can bring more differences into play, from which the various things in their several kinds can be created. Now, let us also examine Anaxagoras' homoiomeria, as the Greeks call it, which the poverty of our native speech does not allow us to name in our own language, but nevertheless, it is easy to explain the thing itself in words. First, as to what he calls the homoiomeria of things, he clearly thinks that bones are made of small and tiny bones, and that flesh is made from small and tiny pieces of flesh, and that blood is created when many drops of blood intermingle with one another, and that from flecks of gold there can be built up gold, and that from small pieces of earth earth can grow, and that fires can be from fires and water from waters, and he imagines and thinks of other things in the same way. And nevertheless he does not allow that void is present in things in any part, nor that there is an end to dividing bodies. Therefore, in both of these reasonings he seems to have made the same errors as those people whom I discussed above. Add that he makes the first beginnings too weak, if they are first beginnings at all, which are endowed with a nature similar to the things themselves, and suffer in the same way and perish, nor does anything hold them back from destruction. For which of them will endure when they are heavily crushed, so that they can escape death, when they are in the very teeth of destruction? Will it be fire, water, air? Which of these? Blood? Bones? None of these, I think, when everything will be as equally and completely mortal as the clearly perceptible things we see with our own eyes perish when they are overcome by some force. But I appeal to the things we have proved before, that nothing can sink into nothingness, nor again grow from nothing. Moreover, since food increases and nourishes the body, we are able to know that veins and blood and bones and sinews are composed of parts different in kind. Or if they say that all foods are mixed in body, or have in themselves small bodies of sinews, and bones and veins besides, and parts of blood, it will happen that all food itself, both dry and liquid, will be supposed to be made out of things unlike itself, with bones and sinews and gore and blood mixed in. Moreover, if whatever bodies grow from the earth are in the earth must necessarily consist of things unlike itself which arise from the earth. Take another case, and you may use the same words. If flame lies hidden in logs, and smoke in ashes, logs must consist of things unlike themselves, which arise from the logs. Moreover, whatever bodies earth nourishes and increases. Lacuna. There remains here some slight means of escaping detection, which Anaxagoras took for himself
that he thinks that all things are mixed with all things and escape detection, but that one thing is visible, whose particles have been mixed in the greatest numbers and are more visible and located right up front. But this is far removed from true reasoning, for it would be natural also for grains of wheat, when they are broken under the oppressive strength of stone, to release a trace of blood or something of those things which are nourished in our body. When we rub with stone on stone, the blood should ooze out. In a similar way, it would be right for grass too, and water often, to release sweet drops, which are similar in taste to the richness of the milk of the wool-bearing sheep. Yes, and it would be right, when clods of earth are crumbled up, for types of grasses and wheat and foliage often to be seen to lie hidden dispersed in tiny portions within the earth. And finally, it would be right when logs would be broken open for ashes and smoke and tiny fires to be hidden. Since the plain facts show that none of this happens, we may know that things are not mixed in things in this way, but rather that seeds mixed up in many ways and common to many things must lie hidden in things. But, you will object, it often happens on great mountains that the neighboring tops of high trees are rubbed together among themselves when a strong south wind forces them to do this until they burst and flash into a flower of flames. And nevertheless fire is not implanted in firs, of course, but there are many seeds of fire which, when they flow together by rubbing, create fiery destruction in the woods. But if there were fully formed flames hidden in the woods, fires would not be able to be contained for a moment. They would destroy woods everywhere. They would incinerate orchards. Now, then, do you see, as we said a little earlier, that it often is very important with these same first beginnings, with what and in what position they are held, and what motions they impart and receive among themselves, and that the same things, a little changed among themselves, create both fires and fir? This is the way even with words themselves, when the letters are changed around a little among themselves, since we designate firs and fires by a change in sound. Finally, if you think that whatever you see in things that are visible cannot be created unless you posit bodies of matter endowed with a nature like the whole, by this reasoning, the first beginnings perish on you. The first beginnings will rock with rolling laughter, howl aloud, and with salty tears drench their faces and cheeks. Now come, understand what remains and hear more clearly. I am very aware how obscure these things are, but great hope for praise strikes my heart with a sharp thyrsus, and at the same time strikes into my breast sweet love for the Muses. Now roused by this in my lively mind, I am traversing the remote places of the Pierides, untrodden by the soul of anyone before. It is a joy to approach pure things, and to drink from them, and it is a joy to pick new flowers, and to seek a preeminent crown for my head from that place whence the Muses had wreathed the temples of no one before. First, because I am teaching about great things and proceeding to free the mind from the narrow bonds of religion. Next, because I am writing so clear a poem about so obscure a subject, touching everything with the charm of the Muses. For this too seems to be not without reason. But just as when physicians try to give loathsome wormwood to children, they first touch the rim of the cup all around with the sweet golden liquid of honey, so that the unsuspecting age of children may be tricked as far as their lips, so that meanwhile the child might drink down the bitter wormwood juice, and though deceived, be not deceased, but rather by such means be restored and become well. So I now, since this system seems for the most part to be too bitter to those who have not tried it, and the common people shrink back from it, I wanted to explain our system to you in sweet-spoken Pierian song, and touch it, so to speak, with the sweet honey of the Muses. I have done so in the hope I might in this way be able to hold your attention in our verses until you look into the whole nature of things, with what shape it is endowed and exists. But since I have shown that the most solid bodies of matter are indestructible and fly around forever without stopping. Now come, let us unfold whether there is a limit to their sum or not, and likewise that which has been discovered to be void, or place or space in which all things take place. Let us consider whether it is all at bottom bounded, or whether it stretches out limitless in extent and immensely deep. Therefore, all that exists is bounded in no direction of its ways, for in that case it would have to have an endpoint. And moreover, it seems that there cannot be an endpoint for anything, unless there is something beyond it which limits it, so that there is seen to be a place beyond which this nature of our senses cannot follow. Now, since it must be confessed that there is nothing outside the universe, it does not have an endpoint, and therefore lacks boundary and limit. It does not matter in what region of the universe you place yourself. So true is it that whatever place anyone occupies, he leaves the universe infinite in all directions to the same extent. Besides, suppose now that the totality of space were to be limited. If someone were to run all the way to its final boundaries and hurl a flying spear, do you prefer to think that, spun with great strength, it would go where it was sent and fly far, or do you think that something would be able to stop and block it? For you must admit and accept one of the two alternatives. Either choice will prevent your escape and force you to concede that the universe stretches forth without limit. For whether there is something that stops it and makes it so that it cannot go where it was sent and reach its goal, or whether it travels beyond, it did not set out from the end of the universe. In this way I will proceed, and, wherever you place the ultimate boundaries, I will ask, what finally happens to the spear? It will turn out that an end of the universe cannot be fixed, and that an opportunity for flight always extends the flight. Besides, if the whole space of the entire sum of things had been shut in and were fixed with certain boundaries, and had been enclosed, by now the supply of matter would everywhere have flowed to the bottom because of its solidity and weight. Nothing could move beneath the cover of the sky, nor would there be a sky at all, nor light of the sun, since all matter would lie gathered in a heap, having by now sunk down in infinite time. But as things are, of course, no rest has been given to the bodies of the first beginnings, since there is absolutely no bottom where they could flow together, so to speak, and take their places. All things are always being carried along in constant motion on all sides, and bodies of matter are supplied from below, speeding out of infinite space. Finally, before our eyes, one thing is seen to limit another. The air hedges in hills, the mountains the air. Land bounds the sea, and sea in return bounds all lands, whereas truly there is nothing which could limit the universe from the outside. Therefore, the nature of place and the space of the abyss is such that neither could shining thunderbolts traverse it on their endless journey, gliding on through an eternal tract of time, nor, further, by their travelling make it so that there remained any less to go. Such an immense supply of space extends everywhere for things, with no limits anywhere in any direction. Moreover, nature ensures that the sum of things cannot on its own set a limit to itself, and forces body to be bounded by void, and what is void to be bounded by body, so that it thus renders the universe infinite by their alternation. Or else one of the two, if the other of them does not bound it, in its single nature extends nevertheless without limit. But if the void were limited, the infinite atoms would not have a place to exist, and if matter were limited, neither the sea nor the land, nor the bright regions of the sky, nor the human race, nor the holy bodies of the gods, would be able to exist for even a small fraction of an hour. For the supply of matter, wrenched apart from its union, would have been dissolved and carried along through the great void, or more accurately, it never would have come together and created anything, since in its scattered state it could not have been brought together. For certainly not by design did the first beginnings of things arrange themselves in their order with keen intent,
nor surely did they reach an agreement about what motions each would take. But since many of them are moved in many ways throughout the universe and from endless time are stirred up and excited by collisions, by trying motions and unions of every kind, they finally arrive at arrangements like those which produce and maintain this sum of things. And it too, preserved for many great years, when once it had been cast into suitable motions, ensures that rivers replenish the greedy sea with the abundant waves of their streams, and that the earth, nurtured by the sun's heat, renews its offspring, and that the race of living things is bred and flourishes, and that the gliding fires of heaven live on. In no way would they do this unless a supply of matter could rise up from the infinite, from which they are accustomed to make up all that is lost in due time. For just as the nature of living things, when deprived of food, loses its bulk and fades, so all things ought to be dissolved as soon as matter fails to be supplied, when it is for whatever reason diverted from its course. Nor are blows from the outside in all directions able to maintain every world that has been gathered together. Indeed, they can repeatedly pound and preserve a part, until others arrive and the sum is able to be supplied. But sometimes they are forced to spring back, and in so doing provide for the first beginnings of things the space and opportunity for escape, so that they can be free and move away from their unions. Wherefore again and again it is necessary that many things be provided, and yet in order that even blows too be present, it is necessary that the supply of matter be everywhere infinite. In these matters, flee far from believing, Memmius, what some say, that everything tends to the center of the universe, and that thus the nature of the world stands firm, without any external blows, and that top and bottom cannot be undone in any direction, because all things tend toward the center, if you can believe that anything is able to stand on itself. And they say that all heavy things that are under the earth press upwards and rest on the earth upside down, just like the images of things we now see in water. And in a similar way, they maintain that animals wander around upside down and cannot fall from the earth to the regions of space below, any more than our bodies of their own accord can fly off into regions of the sky. And that when they see the sun, we gaze upon the stars of the night, and that they share with us in alternation the seasons of the sky, and have nights equal to our days. But empty error has commended these false things to fools, because they have tackled the problem with twisted reasoning. For there can be no center, since the universe is infinite, nor indeed, if there now were a center, would anything be able to rest for all that, rather than be driven far away for any other reason. For all place and space which we call void, whether at the center or not at the center, must yield equally to heavy bodies wherever their movements tend. Nor is there any place where when bodies reach it the power of weight is lost and they stand still in the void. Nor ought that which is void hold up anything, but must, as its own nature requires, hasten to yield. Therefore not at all in this manner can things be held together in union, overcome by a longing for the center. Moreover, since they posit that not all bodies tend to the center, but those of earth and water, the moisture of the sea, and the great waters from the mountains, and the things which are contained in an earthly body, so to speak, but on the contrary they explain that the light breezes of the air and hot fires are carried away together from the center, and so the entire ether twinkles all around with stars, and the flames of the sun are fed into the sky-blue sky, because all heat, fleeing from the center, collects there, nor further could the highest branches of trees leaf out, unless each is fed little by little from the earth. Lacuna. Lest, in the winged way of flames, the walls of the world suddenly fly away and dissolve in the great void, and lest other things follow in a similar way, lest the thundering regions of the sky push upwards, the earth suddenly snatch itself from under our feet, and all of it, among the scattered ruins of things and sky that have let their bodies go, depart through the vast void, so that in an instant of time nothing remains behind except empty space and invisible first beginnings. For from whatever part you will first decide bodies are missing, this part will be the door of death for things, and by it the whole throng of matter will make its exit. Thus you will learn these things, led with little effort. For one thing will be clarified by another, nor will dark night deprive you of your way until you see deeply into the ultimate principles of nature. So things will illuminate other things.